right, so Adeptus Psychonautica. Did I say that correct?
You did indeed, mate.
Well, thank you for coming onto the show today. And I watched some of your videos, and I just like your energy. You have a good vibe. You're
Good.
obviously a highly intelligent person, and I just like your work that you're doing on your channel. So I figured I wanted to know more about who exactly Adeptus Psychonautica was. And so if we could start this conversation with how you came to be this YouTuber online that has a decent following, and where you want to take it, and anything else you want to tell us about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So the YouTube thing started, it was kind of a few different threads coming together. And I would say the main one, the real driver was that I'd been and done a few different kind of psychedelic retreats. I'd done a bit of traveling around Peru, in the Amazon and the Sacred Valley. And one of the sort of the outcomes of these retreats is that, you're going through these things to try and change behaviors or resolve issues. And they sort of give you some advice on how you can maintain the kind of the momentum that you built up through this retreat. And one of them is to have a creative outlet. So, something to sort of focus your energy on. And like sort of most of us do these days, I've been walking around this retreat and around Central America, South America, taking pictures and taking little videos. And so I figured, right, I may as well do something with all this footage I've captured. So, and I figured since I've been to a few of these retreat places, I'll start making review videos, and I'll talk about the places that I've been, and I'll say whether I thought they were good or bad or worth the money or not. So that was kind of one aspect of it. And then also, because of all this, I'd had all these experiences with all these different kind of psychedelic substances. So I just had plenty to talk about. And then this kind of catalyst to do something creative. And then the other thing that was a kind of a factor in it was when I was looking to do these things like these retreats and travel to South America, I wasn't finding a lot of voices like that I could relate to that helped me decide what to do, where to go, what to do, what not to do. There was a lot of very far out there, sort of, leaning more towards the kind of hippie new age stuff. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of very sort of, the very sort of hardcore science background. But I consider myself a very just average everyday person, and I just want to know what works, what's good, what's bad. Mm-hmm. And so that was the kind of a big part of the motivation, was just to put that voice out there. Like, I am not a special, I'm not special. I'm not trying to be a shaman. I'm not trying to be a guru. I'm not trying to claim some sort of amazing wisdom. I'm just a guy, and I'm trying to find what works. And this is my everyday opinion on it. So that's really what I'm kind of doing with my channel, is just try and be the voice of kind of just a normal voice in a kind of what's quite a very broad and sometimes very crazy landscape.
Mm. So I want to talk about what you touched on. You said that was it with the shamans, they recommend that you have some kind of creative outlet after. Mm-hmm. That's really interesting, because I think that, because I'd like your point, some of your videos, you bring up how important it is to integrate these experiences. And I think that's the greatest way to integrate it is whatever you get from these experiences, you put it into whatever your creative outlet is.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the things I do try and address on my channel, because I think there is a bit of a false perception around what actually happens at these retreats and what you get out of it. And I think a lot of that comes from, there is a lot of media attention on things like ayahuasca retreats at the moment. And you get these kind of headlines of, I solved all my problems in 24 hours, and miracle substance from the Amazon, cured everything overnight. And I don't think those are kind of accurate or particularly helpful. Because sure, you can have these experiences which can completely revolutionize your life within a very short space of time. But if you don't take steps to maintain it, if you don't put this kind of work in, you will come down. You will come down from this amazing high that you've had. Mm-hmm. And then, if you just go straight back home, straight back into your kind of toxic relationships, straight back into your kind of shitty habits of, eating junk food or playing video games or in some sort of, bad relationship, then nothing's going to change. And then you'll find yourself 6 months down the line, possibly even in a worse situation, because now you'll be thinking, what went wrong? Why did my life not change? And it didn't change because you didn't do the work. You didn't take the steps to make those changes. So at least the retreats that I've been on really drilled this into that. And part of it was this kind of, have a creative outlook, but there were lots of other sort of almost like a kind of like a, I don't think there were 12 steps, but it was like a kind of 12-step program. I think they had like 7 steps or something, but you need to do some self-reflection. You need to sort of, look at what you like about your life and do more of that. You look at what you don't like about your life and do more of that. Your problems have not been solved overnight. You might have had a really good, kick in the ass to sort of get you on the right track. And that in itself can be an amazing thing, but that's not the end of the journey. It's the start of the journey. And you've got to then, like I said, I always use the phrase, you've got to do the work. If you don't, then don't expect, things to change around. So it's one of these kind of misconceptions around psychedelics that I'm really trying to untangle, which is why I talk a lot about integration.
Yeah, 100%, man. There's a lot of truth to what you just said, because I think it's a lot of people suffer from, they take these, whatever the plant medicine is, and they go through these insane, unfathomable experiences. And then they have these great stories that they have and things and entities that, or feelings that they felt. And then that's it. And I've talked to so many people, and I'm just like, well, they're like, oh, the colors, and just felt this great feeling. But I'm like, yeah, but what does that mean to you? Yeah, exactly. Personal level. And most people, I don't think, know how to do that work. And I think it's a very important thing. And that's why I wanted to speak to you about it.
Yeah, I think there's kind of a mishmash of the times we're in, because without sort of trying to sound snooty about it, we are in this kind of like Instagram generation whereby people are looking for, that one moment. It's kind of drilled into like, that everything happens in this one moment and it's all going to be perfect and everything's going to be amazing. And that, I think that collides quite heavily with a lot of these plant medicines, whereby you can have these amazing transcendent experiences, but before that, there is usually some ugliness that goes with it, particularly with something like ayahuasca. You tend to go through a rough, at best, extremely challenging time to get there. Some people are lucky and just have, psychedelic fireworks on day one, and good for them. But for most people, they're going to work through a very difficult process. And the deeper the problem you come into it with, the more brutal that process is going to be. But then I've certainly encountered people on retreats where they don't necessarily want to admit that they're going through that difficulty. And you do have to kind of unpick yourself before you put yourself back together again. But they're so desperate to have this kind of Instagram moment that, at the end of night one, when everyone says, how was your ceremony? Then they don't want to say, that was horrible. That was like the worst night of my life, because that's not the Instagram-y kind of way. And I've seen people on retreats where it was just obvious they were bottling it up or falling apart, and they just didn't feel, for whatever reason, they could, just let it out. And that's, for me, that's the most important part of being on the retreat, this is the place to just let fly with, whatever's going on inside you. But people are very, I've seen people leave retreats still bottling it up, and then sort of, I've stayed in touch with them, they're kind of falling apart later on. But that in itself is a tricky thing, because our society is not really based around, falling apart in public. And so it's kind of almost a skill in itself to have that surrender, to just like, okay, here's, my heart was leaving. It took me a long time to get my head around it, because, we're all British and we're all sort of, stiff upper lip, and we don't talk about stuff like that. But that's where the real sort of therapy happens, is just let it out.
Yeah. You think that's what it is? It's just, you have to surrender to the power of these things?
I think you've got to sort of surrender to the power, but also surrender to yourself and be honest with yourself. And so, if you kind of picture like a worst case scenario of someone coming in, like going on to retreat with some kind of, horrific trauma. Let's say I was on a retreat once with some military guys who were just, talking about watching the friends just explode around them, and just the most, things that would just strip you of your humanity. And to get back to that humanity, you're going to have to kind of relive a lot of that stuff. It's going to be brutal. In fact, that's what you signed up for. You signed up for, this is not supposed to be a gentle experience. It's the whole aspect of like going to the jungle, living very basically, having this very basic plain diet, having this, like a collision with this medicine. It's not supposed to be unicorns and rainbows. If you get unicorns and rainbows, awesome, brilliant, and I've had them, and it's certainly desirable. But yeah, I think if you're going for one of these retreats, I absolutely always expect the nightmare. And like I say, if you get the sort of the pretty fireworks, but brilliant, that'll be a nice send off. But I go to challenge myself. I think of it as similar to like these like endurance races, like Spartan races or something like that. You're not going to go to something like that for a gentle jog. You are going to just break your body to find your limit, to sort of see where you get to. And that's how I sort of view a retreat. This is like one of the biggest challenges you can put yourself through, and it's supposed to be. So don't feel bad when you want to break down and cry and like scream at the sky and stuff. That's exactly what's supposed to happen.
It's interesting in the human experience how we have to like put ourselves through these whether it's physical or mental, emotional, whatever it is, you have to put yourself through these like very intense states in order to like get to the other side. Like we have to just put ourselves through pain and suffering for some reason, and then on the other side of that pain that we inflict upon ourselves is some kind of, I guess you can say, revelations, bliss, peace, or just like healing. But it's just like this weird aspect, because I like how you brought up how similar it is to like physical sensations, because there's probably a lot of people that want to go through these physical sensations like Spartan races, and they want to get something out of it, just like it's just like a psychedelic experience. And it's the same, it's like using a different way, and using your body in a different way, but still the same outcome. We just want to heal ourselves and become better people in a way.
Yeah. Well, I wonder, with the pain and suffering you talk about, I wonder, is it actual pain and suffering, or is it just that anything that we perceive as outside of our comfort zone, we instantly perceive as pain and suffering? So, we operate within this kind of like, if this is like the spectrum of our experience, of all possible human experience, say, then we our 9-to-5 day-to-day lives are like here. Yeah. And so anytime we step out of it, like when I went to Peru and I was in the Amazon, then I was in I was sleeping in a village. I was in like a sort of a tambo shack. I had a bed. There was nothing. It was not uncomfortable, but still I was feeling like, oh my God, this is like I'm missing my home. I'm missing my sort of comfort. And to call it pain and suffering would probably be a bit extreme, but I was feeling discomfort, I could say at least, for no particular reason. Everything was being provided for me, but it was a challenge to me. And I think that's what these experiences are. I think that's why we're drawn to these extremes of people who go skydiving or scuba diving or mountain climbing, whatever. We're just trying to broaden that the piece of bandwidth that we have of human experience, so that we can understand more, because it's only when you have that you really that you're learning something new, or you're getting some kind of new experience. Otherwise, you kind of like, you're born there and you die there, and then that's the totality of your experience. So I think that's why we find the extremes so appealing, and obviously different people are drawn to different extremes. Yeah,
that's very true, man. I mean, you don't have to go into the middle of the jungle and do ayahuasca. It really just comes down to stepping out of your comfort zone, and that's how we grow as human beings. And, like you said, there's various different ways on how people do it. And ayahuasca is definitely a revolutionary way to do it. But it really is that basic premise. It's just stepping out of the confines of this little life that we built for ourselves of comfort. And then once you do that, and you see that there's all this going on, and, there's a whole universe going on. And it might be a little uncomfortable to see that, but that's how we grow.
Yeah. I know, definitely, just your point there, I am strongly of the opinion that like something like ayahuasca, it is not for everyone. And I don't mean that in some sort of elitist, it's not for you. I just mean, it's just, everyone has different medicines, different people have different, I feel I'm not particularly, drawn to something like cannabis. I've tried it a few times. It just doesn't sit well with me. That's fine. It's not my medicine, but I appreciate that for other people that really helps. Likewise, not everyone is going to be comfortable with that ayahuasca experience. And it's not like a macho kind of like, oh, I'm so tough because I could do that. It's just different people have different callings, and different sort of teachers are suited to different people. I've no particular desire to jump out of an airplane and skydive. So people just need to find their own medicine within that thing. And I think when you do that, you can sort of unlock very, rewarding experiences.
Yeah. Like you said, people just have to find their own medicine. But I've heard that DMT and ayahuasca finds you. That's the woo-woo explanation.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different sort of slants you can put on that. You could put like there is certainly an aspect of the New Age crowd which sees this as some kind of like telepathic calling or some sort of universal synchronicity event or something like that. And I don't have a huge opinion on that. It's fine. I think there are just moments in your life when something calls out to you, like I'm using the term call loosely. So, it could be something as simple as you're in a bookshop and you see a book title, and just from the title of that book, you think, I've got to read this book. Or you see there's some phrase that you hear and you think, God, that's such a good phrase. Like it just resonates with you. Yeah. And I think that's how I interpret this call thing, is that when I heard about something like DMT or ayahuasca, then I don't know, there was something where I just thought, okay, there is something about this that appeals to me in a way that didn't. And yeah, if you could say that's the call. Was it Mother Ayahuasca telepathically reaching out to me across, from the Amazon? I don't if it was, I don't really, I don't care enough to know. What I care is that I thought it was something that resonated with me. So, the calls, wonderful. My wife, I think my wife takes it a bit more new agey than I do.
Yeah. I mean, hey, whatever. Like, that's what I respect about you, man, is that you're just about the end result. Like, it just doesn't really matter, whatever.
That's the only thing that I think matters to, and I have said this like a few times, like I don't really care about, the explanation. It sounds a little bit flippant, which I appreciate, but what I mean by that is I'm currently occupying this, this shell, this sort of meat body, and I don't know what happened before that from terms of consciousness. I don't know what's going to happen after that. All I know is that I'm currently doing this, and I want to make this the best version of this it can be. I want it to be the most positive, the happiest. I want to have a positive effect on the people around me, the ones I care about the most. Like in terms of what is the explanation of all this psychedelic stuff? Like, it doesn't really matter. And at least not to the point where people start getting fanatical about it and going, it's a bit like kind of conspiracy theories in that manner. Because, conspiracy theory can be a lot of fun to talk about, and you can talk about like Area 51 and it's all juicy and you can get your claws into it. But then if you're sort of spending your life obsessively researching Area 51 and the only conversation that you can have with somebody is about Area 51 or how about this, then it's like, who cares? Is this making your life better now? And I feel the same about psychedelics with people who like say, no, it's definitely a higher dimensional portal to dimensions. They're like, does it matter? And someone says, so it's definitely angels coming from God, or like, okay, cool. It's to me, it's just all amazingly awesome experiences. Who cares?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know what you mean. It's just, it really doesn't even matter. I mean, it's just different. It's just, ultimately, it just comes down to different symbols that we try to explain it with, and it really never does justice for the truth of what it actually is. And I don't think we can ever actually explain what it is. So yes, like you said, it doesn't matter. It is just fun to talk about.
Oh, for sure. And I love talking about it, and all the sort of the various concepts around it of like, is not just when psychedelics, but consciousness in general. You know, are we receiving consciousness? Are we generating consciousness? You know, I know we both got a mutual friend in James Cook, and you know, I love talking to James, and we exploring all these things, and some of the theories that sort of pop up there. Love it, absolutely love it. But the end result is still the same in that this is me, and if consciousness theory A is correct or consciousness theory B is correct, I'm still Rob. That's kind of, you know, this is what I've got to work with.
Yeah, you always come back to this experience, no matter how far out you go. You always come back into the human, three-dimensional experience.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. I think this is because I think it's only through this that we get to process and appreciate that. Because if you spent your, you know, having had one of these like sort of transcendent experiences where you are connected to the universal consciousness and, you know, plumbed into the sort of the what feels like the author of creation, then at that moment, I mean, it's amazing, but it's only really when you come back into this that you can truly appreciate that. If you were there 24/7, then that's just, you're there. Then there's nothing there. You kind of just dissolved into it. Mm-hmm. So I think that the sort of the real value is what you bring back. And, you know, it's when I did a video about sort of ego death, and people are sort of obsessing over, killing my ego so that I am one forever. And it's like, well, you can only even process the ego death experience once you come back into the ego. So the idea that your ego is permanently gone is complete bullshit anyway. So, I think that the value is always here. You know, visit the transcendent, get what you can, but bring it back here and use it in some kind of positive way.
Yeah, 100%. I think they're just tools. It's just, and if you use it the right way, you can definitely better your life. But if you don't, then it's just going to be another experience like watching television or something at the end of the day.
Yeah, and if you get if you really sort of go too far with it, then I think it can go completely the other way, where you can just, I mean, you know, I don't think these substances are in any way kind of addictive, but if you're kind of just constantly chasing the transcendent and then you're kind of squandering the human experience, then I mean, that in my mind is just a complete waste of time as well. And also it kind of, it runs contrary to a lot of these kind of, one of the more kind of fun concepts around, you know, consciousness and psychedelics is that we are the universe experiencing itself. You know, that our purpose, for want of a better word, as a human being is to understand and to experience life as matter. So, you know, we were part of the kind of, you know, of the Godhead or the universal consciousness, whatever you want to call it, and we splintered off and we experience this life so that we can understand it. Which, you know, I think that this is a great kind of theory. I kind of enjoy this one. But if that's for the people who subscribe to that theory, then that just says even more. Well, your job then is to appreciate matter, not to spend your time constantly staring at the transcendent. Because that's where you were anyway, according to that theory. You got to live this life to the fullest, and that's what I absolutely intend to do.
Yeah, that's great. That's 100%. You just don't get lost in, you know, it's like you have to find that happy medium between getting lost in the you know, in the woo, and then also not being too rational, just like being able to be fluid and going back and forth and taking what you need from, like, as you say, the other side, or, you know, whatever that transcendent realm is, and incorporating it into your life. Yeah, 100%, man. I think that's a paradigm that this world needs to work its way into, because that's, I mean, ultimately, I think that's where we came from when we were in these hunter-gatherer societies and using these things in our past. Like, that's how they were used. And I think that's that's like a model that we need to incorporate into the future so we can create better people and a better society ultimately.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's kind of one thing that I've had to sort of try and incorporate myself, because like I am having these experiences, and then, you know, I am going back into work and doing my sort of like my 9-to-5 job. And it's a funny thing, because I could go back into work, and I could, you know, say something like, if someone said, what did you do over the weekend? I could say, oh yeah, well, my wife had a baby or something. And they would like pat me on the back. Oh, congratulations. Well done. Or, I got married, or I went to, it was my birthday. Like, congratulations, dude. If I went back into work and said, yeah, I had this transcendent experience where I was in communion with the creative force of the universe, that room would go quiet. There's no kind of structure in our current sort of society for that. And I think like what you're saying with like the hunter-gatherer sort of aspect, that was there, and it still is there in South America. I think this is why South America is so attractive as a kind of retreat destination. Mm-hmm. It's because they can have a conversation around the transcendent on Tuesday morning. It's like it's what did you do last night? Oh well, I was in the jungle, and then sort of Mother Ayahuasca came to me in the spirit of the jaguar, and they're yeah. What happened? They've mm-hmm. got the framework to be able to do that, and we don't at all in Europe. I'm sure it's probably the same in over in the US. It's mm-hmm. there's just no there's no cohesion between, I'd say, even the spirit, any kind of form of spiritual, even like sort of religious talk doesn't really kind of flow anymore into sort of like office conversation. Yeah. So yeah, we need to find this connection again somehow.
Somehow.
Yeah. So I have no idea how. I'm not going to theory on that. I'll leave that up to smarter people than me.
I think it's just small steps, and we're like, it's just it starts with people having a conversation like this, and YouTube channels like yours, and people getting more educated about it, and then as more people know, it'll just be like a snowball effect, and more people know what it is and talk about it with their friends and family, and it's a slow change that I think the world is going toward. And, in order for it to be actually adopted in paradigms like that, and, it's actually it's in office talk or regular, coffee shop talk or something like that, I think we have a long way to go, and we'll probably live in a different world by then. But it starts with at an individual basis of us just having these intelligent, not even intelligent, just like level-headed conversations.
Just honest, I think it is, isn't it? It's just honest conversations, yeah.
Authentic, honest conversations, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, it does feel like the battleship is changing direction. I mean, certainly when I was like a teenager, I would have never thought like things like sort of cannabis would start being legalized, and the idea of something like mushrooms being legalized would have just been absolutely insane. And it's happening. So that's going in the right direction, and you're starting to see more sort of, prominent figures talking about these things, like sort of academics, and, there's more studies being done. So I think things are definitely going in the right direction. And I think one of the places where I found the freedom to be able to talk about it is because of being able to go on retreat to places like Peru, because no, you're not breaking any laws. If I go on a retreat to Peru, and I tell everybody at work, I don't go into excruciating detail of it, but if they say, where are you going on vacation? I say, I'm going to Peru, I'm going to go to the Amazon, I'm going to take part in some shamanic ceremonies, and like, oh, okay, yeah, and that's about as far as the conversation goes. Mm-hmm. But it does something like ayahuasca in a retreat setting. Yeah, that's a sort of criminal-free setup, and so there's nothing wrong with being able to talk about that. And that certainly was one of the things that gave me that sort of confidence to be able to talk about it. And we certainly see it, like a lot of people are talking about going on retreats now, and academics, and like voices are coming up, and even some voices which I never would have dreamed of start talking about like psychedelics. I've listened to a podcast the other day with Richard Dawkins talking about doing psychedelics and stuff. So it's really, he's on Sam Harris's podcast. Richard Dawkins was kind of sounding very interested in.
Is he going to do it?
I don't know. I'd have to chat with him, but he was certainly he was very open to it. I think he said he was looking at MDMA as a starting point, which just sounds insane.
I would love to see that.
Oh, well, they should be able to buy tickets for that.
Just him on stage on 5 grams of mushrooms, and everybody watches and see what he does.
And it's like, I was wrong. It was all wrong. All the God
there is a God. Yeah, that'd be very interesting, because he is a staunch atheist, which is actually respectable in my eyes. But it would be interesting, because he must get curious. Actually, the story was, because he's on Joe Rogan, and the story was his dad was huge proponent in psychedelics, and I don't know what his job was or what he did, but this was obviously a long time ago because Richard Dawkins is old.
Yeah.
But he said on Joe's podcast that he was a huge, like, he was just really really behind the power of psychedelics, but he told Richard that he didn't want him to do it because I don't know if he said he couldn't handle it or he just said he didn't want him to like corrupt his mind or something like that.
Right.
So ever since then, he hasn't done it. It's because of his father. He's been leery of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's understandable, particularly, I mean, I'm assuming that he was sort of raised in England. So, we don't have that kind of, like, I can understand, like, in whatever that might be, like 1950s, 1960s England. Yeah, what is the psychedelic setting in 1950s England? I can understand, I would be worried telling my kids in that sort of environment not to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, just on the subject of Dawkins, I absolutely love Richard Dawkins. I think, he gets a lot of grief for, what's seen as his very sort of like, snarky attitude. But I mean, the guy was like standing up in the face of just this juggernaut of organized religion and just sort of doing similar to what I try to do is just say, oh, hold on a minute, guys, there is some kind of bullshit that needs addressing here. Like, and that's no one's saying that you cannot have your religion. But if you're telling me that, your religion makes this and this and this and this okay, no, and I have, a lot of respect for Dawkins for being one of those voices, at that time, what was it like, in year 2000 or something, when atheist was like a dirty word sort of thing. So I think, I've got a lot of time for the guy. And that said, I'd still love to see him have one of these transcendent experiences.
Yeah.
Just to see what he'd make of it.
Yeah, 100%. Hopefully he does. Hopefully, that would be insane. But that'd be great if he went through it and then it'd still be the same. And like if he was still, I don't know, because like once you open that door to like that other realm of your mind, like he would probably still have the same views, but I think there would be something that changes in his mind. There would have to be, man. Like there would just have to be something.
I think it would depend on sort of which way you kind of go with it, because I think there's a thing, for most people, we're trapped in a very sort of like ordinary sort of paradigm, and then you have this experience and you've become aware of stuff you were never aware of, stuff that I just never had to cross your mind before. And I think stuff like with guys like Dawkins, he's not a particular, in my opinion, he's not an arrogant man. I actually think he's a very humble man. This is a guy who's very aware of his place within the universe, of his place in the natural order, and that, there is this story far older than him. And, all that he is, a part of, this biosphere of the planet. This is not a guy who's like, thinks that, humanity is necessarily the greatest thing since sliced bread. So I think, I think you can have that transcendent experience. It can go outwards into the very woo territory of like, oh, wow, I'm, aliens and whatnot. But it can also go very inwards and like, oh, this is my place. I understand now, I'm feeling a sort of, that closer link with my ancestry and, just a sort of a feeling of belonging within the universe. It doesn't necessarily have to go cosmic. It can be a very sort of, Jungian style archetypal journey. And I would think that would be probably, what I would expect more in line for someone like Dawkins. And it's similar to with Sam Harris, who's also like a big proponent of psychedelics. And he's going to be very open about his use of psychedelics. He did a podcast about 6 months ago where he'd done sort of, I think, 5 grams in the darkness with blindfold on. And again, full of a reverence of the transcendent, but not getting carried away with it into, again, it's what do you do with that transcendence? You can acknowledge its power, acknowledge its beauty, but still, bring it, sort of keep it grounded, I think.
Mm-hmm. So you've done ayahuasca like over 30 times, right?
Yeah, I mean, I say that I've just kind of lost count now, to be honest. All
right, so a lot. You've done it many times, right?
Yeah. I would say it's probably somewhere between like sort of 30, 40 times, yeah.
that's a very large amount. You are aware of that, right? That is, at least to a person like me. I've never done it. So like to hear somebody that's done it 30, 40 times, I'm just like, wow.
It's you know, I go on these retreats sometimes like once a year, sometimes twice a year. A retreat can be anything between sort of 2 and 4 ayahuasca sessions in a week. So it kind of it soon sort of some mounts up on it, and again, it just got to a point where I kind of stopped counting. But I think part of that is I'm happy to admit to anyone I have issues that I'm working on. I lost my mother at a very early age to suicide. It kind of haunts me a bit, and I'm trying to resolve these problems. And like we talked about earlier, I have to sort of wade into the deep waters. So I'm not particularly doing it for the love of getting high, because as I mentioned, most of these things I go into expecting a very difficult experience, and I get it. It's some of these things are about as far from pleasurable as they can be, but they have a benefit, and I feel like I kind of make a little bit of progress every time. I was back when I started down this path, I was nearly crippled with anxiety. I was having panic attacks. I was struggling to leave the house. And I'd say that most of that aspect has been dealt with through these medicines. My anxiety levels are nowhere near what they were now. I'm a lot less socially awkward. I used to be incredibly antisocial, and so I'm addressing these things a little bit at a time. And now I'm really kind of focusing on the sort of emotional blockages that I have. But yeah, so to me, it doesn't actually seem like a lot. It's just what I need to do, really. It's
yeah.
And one of the things I kind of picked up early on when I was starting with this is that the end goal really is that I don't need to do it. I'm not necessarily looking that this is my religion, or that this is my, this is me until the day I die now. It's the end goal for ayahuasca should be to not take ayahuasca anymore. It is supposed to be a medicine, not like an ongoing treatment sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, will I get to that? I don't know. But it's definitely not recreational. I'll put it that way. There are other things I do which I would describe as more recreational, but certainly not ayahuasca.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't trying to judge you or down you on how many times you do it, like how many ever times you do it. That's, hey, whatever you got to do to make yourself happy, that's perfect, man. I was just actually applauding you and saying that's actually, that's courageous, because like I said, to a guy like me that has never done it, I'm just like, that is absolutely insane. I'm not insane, like in a bad way. I'm saying that's just like, I can't even fathom. Like it's great. So what I wanted to ask you is like, what did you get from all of these experiences? And you did go into it a little bit already, but what do you, I mean, is there anything significant that you can go over and like how it changed you as a person?
Yeah, loads, mate. So I mean, there's different steps to it. So the main one, which I think really kicked everything off for me, which is where the point I kind of realized, wow, there is something in this experience that was a bit of a game changer. And that was at the point where I started getting into where I first tried DMT, smoked DMT. Like I mentioned before, I was having very bad anxiety. My panic attacks were getting to the point where I was, some days just couldn't leave the house. I'd go out on like a Saturday afternoon with my wife and kids, and just have to go back to the house. I couldn't do it. I was collapsing on the floor, and I also have epilepsy. So the anxiety of my panic attacks was triggering the epilepsy I had anyway. And then part of my panic attacks became that I would be scared about having an epileptic seizure, which would then bring on an epileptic seizure because I was so panicking. And I just got stuck in this circle. I was like, 35 or something, and I just thought my life was completely fucked. I was, part of my job was doing like a lot of traveling around Europe. I was having, seizures in airports. I was, because I was traveling on my own, like I was trapped in countries where I couldn't speak languages and even explain to people what was going on with me. I didn't even know what was going on with me. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I was just convinced I was going to die. And I just had this just cloud over my head, convinced like by the time I am 40, I'm going to be dead. My wife's going to be a widow and my kids are going to be, and I was probably in some sort of depression. And yeah, I just felt like my life was completely screwed. For whatever reason, I can't remember how it came about. I think it was one of my friends suggested it for some other, probably because we'd heard it on Joe Rogan or something, but so that's why getting hold of some DMT. So we just tried it. And I had just this experience of meeting the divine. And this voice, as clear as day, as I'm talking to you, just said, dude, don't worry about it. You come in through that door and you're going to go out through that door and it's all okay. And like sort of 10 minutes, and it sounds completely simple, but it was like the most important thing I ever needed to hear. I was like, oh, right, yeah. So that's before I was born. That's death. And the part in the middle, don't worry about it. Got it. I came to like sort of like 10 minutes later after this DMT thing. Anxiety just dropped instantly. Fear of death just dispelled, completely dispelled. So again, that just reduced my anxiety even further. Seizures just dropped because I wasn't having anxiety as much anymore. And I was just stood there like, holy shit. Like in the space of like 15 minutes, like, something which I thought was my destiny to have a crappy life was just completely reversed by some sort of transcendent experience. So that was what kind of led me to think, okay, I need to explore this more. And just from that, from that one sort of kickstart, I've then gone on to sort of work on confronting my mother's suicide, which is something I just bottled up since I was like 3 years old. Sort of understanding even understanding a relationship to what a mother is. I didn't have a mother. I didn't know what it was I was even missing. So these are, like we were talking about this bandwidth thing before, these are thoughts that it could never even occurred to me to have. And now I was kind of able to have them and process them in a way that's kind of useful and like sort of, to make sure that I'm not passing this stuff onto my kids, to understanding like, oh, right, okay, that little bit of behavior I do, that is kind of weird. And perhaps it's weird because I grew up in a kind of a weird household, or, I didn't have, maybe I look at women this way because I didn't have a strong sort of maternal force, like when I was growing up. And it's when I was kind of in my, formative years, these just questions were just not on the radar anywhere. So I think being able to have them and to sort of process them, this is like, I think the greatest gift we get from these sort of medicines. And it keeps on going. And every time I have, one of these sessions, I might get some new insights or learn something new. And sometimes it's painful. It can be, I put out a video about 6 months ago now of like a mushroom trip that I had, which just completely floored me in how emotionally painful it was, because I was just suddenly hit with like just waves of grief and loneliness. And it just kind of like, it came to me that this was the grief and loneliness that I should have experienced when I was 3 years old. But a 3-year-old doesn't know how to have that. You don't, a 3-year-old does not know how to process the mother committing suicide. And so you bottle it up, or you build like a kind of a firewall to block it off. And now here I am, in my 40s, and it was just like, it opened up. But I was glad for it, because I think it sounds a little bit like masochistic, but there is a beauty in these experiences. If you think back to like your teenage years, a lot of like the sort of, some of the biggest events in your teenage, like the heartbreak of like your first girlfriend or something like that. There is, even these painful events are worth experiencing. Not saying I necessarily, want to go and seek them, but I think that they're worth having. And so being able to unbottle that stuff, which I would have yeah, I think without these substances, I would have just bottled up until the day I die and been sat there on my deathbed full of like, what the fuck? What's all this regret and bitterness inside me? Mm-hmm. So yeah, to let it out is very, it's very relieving in a way.
Yeah. So that's what it helped you do, is like just confront your demons, I guess you could say.
Yeah, confront, but also understand, and sort of, as well as kind of understand your demons, understand you in relation to those demons. Like it's, like, you kind of, I want to understand like who my mother is, why she might have wanted to do these things. Like how does that make me feel? Like what about, not only the love that I missed out on from her, but, a child wants to give love to its parent, and just all these different perspectives. I was going through this experience, and this was on one of my ayahuasca experiences, just seeing it from all these different angles of like, my needs as an adult to understand these things, but also the kind of the need of a child to like, to kind of, to be able to release these things. It's kind of, have you ever seen like, when you've been into like a supermarket or something and you just see like a kid just break down and just go nuts on the floor and start smashing, like the parents don't know what to do with it. That's kind of what kids need to do sometimes, but then when you're faced with something like like an event that's just orders of magnitude more than they can cope with, children don't know what to do with it. So in that case, they kind of bottle it up. So yeah, I was just going through this experience from reliving sort of events from my past from all these different angles. From one moment I was my mother, the next moment I was me. I was the child me, and yeah, it was like 40 years of therapy, just like condensed into this like hour of experience. And yeah, I cannot imagine how that could have played out any other way, because I'm sure it possibly could have done through years of therapy, but I'm not sure I would have been receptive to that therapy. I think I needed that kind of, like the dam to be broken, because I didn't even know it was there.
Yeah, that is strange. It seems like we hold trauma in our bodies and our minds, and that we don't even know that we hold that trauma. I mean, some people say we hold trauma from other lifetimes as well, but that's going to a whole nother aspect in conversation. But just in this lifetime, it seems like we have like conscious memory, and then we also have unconscious memory. And it seems like unconscious memory plays a huge part. And it seems like these plant medicines enable us to access that unconscious memory and things that aren't serving us in that unconscious memory.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't think it's in any way open to dispute, because I think most of us have had some kind of like experience, where you're in the shower or you're distracted or something like that, and you just go, like, Jesus, that is exactly that. It's you just have this flash of memory from the unconscious. You weren't searching for it consciously. It just surfaced, and you have a visceral reaction to it. You remember that time you were embarrassed at school, and you go, fuck you. Yeah. And we all do it. Everybody can relate to that experience. So this unconscious memory, which I think is absolutely there. So, sometimes something just gets written into memory, written into like a corner of the hard drive, and it just forgets to get recycled or flushed out. And yeah, and and I think that's when we have that visceral reaction, that kind of, that is our body attempting to, do something with the energy. And it's kind of, it is manifested in this kind of bizarre, almost kind of like seizure-like way. I mean, you could take that into an extreme, and I've certainly had people who say, I don't subscribe to this particularly myself, that, something like the epilepsy that I have is a further manifestation of that this is, some kind of trauma has been written into your brain in such a way that it's formed a kind of a brain scar, and that when you have something like a seizure, that is just, it's the only way your body knows how to release that energy, and so you kind of you shake it out. And again, I don't necessarily particularly subscribe to that, but I certainly I'm down with this idea of unconscious memory, and that there are ways that our body is trying to get rid of energy, I think, unconsciously. And I think when we have something like a psychedelic, that is the melding of the conscious and the unconscious.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we see all these kind of archetypal figures and all this kind of, all this archetypal geometry and patterns, something that seems to get reported all over the world, regardless of sort of culture or tradition. We all start seeing that sort of like, patterns and geometry and archetypal figures such as, like, the great mother or the old king or all these sort of things. And it's, to me, this seems logical that there is something baked into us here, or at least that the psychedelic allows us to access something ancient with us. And again, I think that's why it conjures up this feeling of something ancient. You feel like this sense of ancestry. So that makes total sense to me, and I do lean towards that sort of more Jungian view on it, rather than the kind of aliens and extra dimensional view.
Do you think that? So you think we have this like collective unconsciousness between human beings?
I don't know necessarily about to a degree. Yeah, I mean, we are coming from all coming from a same DNA blueprint. At some point, if you follow the tree down far enough, then we are. You are going to hit a common point. So it would make sense to me that whatever it is sort of the hardware kind of blueprint there is. It's a bit like, when everyone turns on their computer and the first thing you see is a black screen. It says, loading MS-DOS or whatever. You see the initial bit of the operating system before Windows kicks in.
Yeah.
That's the common bit. And I think in human beings, that common bit is this kind of, a set of archetypes, a way for us to understand each other on some sort of fundamental level, so that, whichever culture, you are in, that there is a set of just hardwired bits of programming, for want of a better, so that we can just understand, this is this is like the mother, this is the matriarch, this is the structure of these people. This is how I might communicate with these people. I understand that, an offering of food is, this is an offering of friendship and these kind of things. There's just something we know as humans. And so I think this, you could call it the collective unconscious, or, something that's baked into DNA. But I think there's certainly something, there is a common human experience, I think.
Yeah. The common human experience of just, like that, knowing that you're human. I've come to that conclusion actually on, I think it was high doses. I don't even know. Of high doses of probably mushrooms or cannabis, one of them, right? Just like that commonality of the human experience. And I felt that between everybody. Like I remember specifically, I was lying in bed in the dark and I just felt like what it feels like to be a human. And there is that, like, that sense, like no matter how different that I may feel than somebody from, say, I don't know, in the middle of Zimbabwe, or that, I have no actual, it seems like, relation to, there is that, like, that felt experience of just being a human being, like that untethered connection of just having this experience of the five senses and of the mind.
Yeah, I've had the same. In fact, it was my very first ayahuasca experience where I had that, and I remember I was in this kind of this hall with all these other people doing this ceremony, and there was a few candles that were lit, and it was flickering the sort of candlelight across the ceiling, and I just kind of fell back on my mat and started seeing kind of cave paintings emerge out of the shadow, these kind of tribal cave paintings, and I just reached up and looked at my hand. And I just thought, I had that kind of thought, what you just described, that I am a human being.
I think everybody's been there, yeah.
Yeah, and I realized at that point that at some point in like ancient history, the first human being would have had that, there must have been a first human who had that first conscious thought, like in whatever language it was, like, I am this.
I am.
And that thought from that, person way back in prehistory, to me, the thing, the chain just formed. And like you said, it's funny you talk about like sort of tribes in Zimbabwe. That's exactly what I saw. I saw where I was. I saw all my ancestral chain going back. I saw how I was linked to all these other, tribes on the, people on the planet. I was looking at the sort of like the flickering of the candle flame, and just realized that at that exact moment, there must be, at least like tens of millions of other people in some shape or form stirring into a flame, whether it's around a campfire or whether it's around, a fire in the sort of the home, or whether it's like a candle. And I just felt this sense of connection it was transcendent. It was, I felt like I knew my place. I felt like, that this connection of humanity just meant something. It's, the spirit of humanity, that it was something greater than I was. And it was humbling, and it was just, amazing to realize you are a part of something. And it just reinforces this idea, like, I have an obligation to make my part in this chain the most valuable thing that I can give to it. I can't just squander my life because I'm part of this chain, and I'm going to, my children are going to be part of this chain, and their children, it's going to go, and from beginning of time till the end of time. And it's my responsibility to make the most of it. And it was the actual experience themselves. Like I said, I was looking at a candle, I was looking at shadows. So it certainly wasn't the most far out I've ever been on psychedelics, but in terms of what it meant to me, it meant everything. And I think those kind of experiences are I think when it can sort of sometimes be a bit of a dirty word, but that to me was a spiritual experience. It was deeply profound. And not every psychedelics experience is spiritual like that. And I think that's, it's another one of these phrases I'm trying to put my own sort of phrasing to it so that it can be used normally, because again, you start talking about being spiritual and they go, oh God, people, he's going to start trying to push the Bible at me or whatever. So, but those spiritual experiences they're desirable. That was what it was. I would strive to get back to that experience if I could. But again, you can't control what kind of experience you get with these things.
Yeah. I think that for me, how I defined what a spiritual awakening is, quote unquote, because that's something, that's another buzzword that's thrown around and people have their own interpretations of it. But I think if you want to put it in the most realistic point of view and, in a way that everybody can relate to, a spiritual awakening is realizing that me and you are the same thing. Even though we might not look like it, we are having this shared experience that is the same thing. And it's not only me and you, it's 7.5 billion people all around the world. And because of that shared experience, we're all, cliche again, we're all one. We're all part of this experience that is being human. And that is putting it at the simplest form, in my opinion, a spiritual awakening. Because not everybody knows that. Like, I've heard the term before that we're all one, man. Like, we're all this one thing. And I was just like, what does that even mean? Like, I'm not you. Like, how are we all one? But there's just like a simple like switch that has to flick in your head to know what it actually means to be a human being. Because before, like, I was called a human in, going throughout my day, I'm Gary Haskins, I'm this guy, I'm some white guy that lives in America. But then when you realize, like, you take away all those titles and you realize what it actually is to be in this experience, and it opens you up to like, oh shit, everyone else is in this experience with me. And it's that simple. It's just a feeling. I really don't know how else to explain it. It's like an epiphany. It's like a revelation.
Yeah, for sure. I'd go a little bit sort of further with that as well. I think another aspect of it, which I think certainly, I would say what you just described is the foundation upon which any other kind of spirituality needs to kind of occur. So you have this feeling of oneness, and I think that feeling, it allows you to sort of then feel things like, compassion and empathy and understanding for all your fellow humans. And also that, and this is where I think somewhere the kind of the spiritual psychedelic community gets it wrong. That sort of compassion and empathy also has to happen at the level of that. Some of these people haven't gone through this thing yet. So you have to be able to reach them and communicate with them in a way where they're not sort of, necessarily have the understanding of what you've been through. And I think particularly in a lot of the new age spiritual community, they can get very snooty about like, oh, well, I'm so enlightened and you don't understand me sort of thing. I'm so above you. And that serves no purpose in my, like this whole sort of enlightened speak. I think, this is not to downplay the actual act of enlightenment or the act of awakening, but to club people over the head with it and make it into some sort of like elite little club, I think is completely counterproductive.
Yeah.
But then I would sort of, on top of that kind of spiritual foundation, I think then there's a part of it is then sort of knowing yourself and knowing sort of like what your aligning yourself to your sort of higher power. And that higher power, it doesn't necessarily have to be, like a god or some sort of thing. It could be, what you want to do with your sort of, with your life. And it could be something as simple as like, you want to be a good person. You want to be the best person that you can be. I want this to be the best version of me it can be. I want to be a good husband. I want to serve others. I want to fix the mistakes that my father made, whatever it is, some sort of higher power. And then I think in that kind of moment of spiritual awakening, where you are on that path, and you don't, like, I don't think the path ever actually has an end. But you feel spiritually aligned when you're on it, and you start to feel when you're not on it. Like I know that when I start acting like an asshole online, or if I'm sort of, mindlessly playing video games, for 10 hours a day, like I might be doing it, but there's something in me that knows like, dude, you just, stop eating all the chocolate, dude. Just, so, and then when you get yourself back on track, again, you feel it, you sort of feel that alignment, and you start feeling sort of positive, and your posture changes, and it's, so I think, it's a kind of a bit of a mishmashed answer, but I think that's how I sort of perceive my take on spirituality, is that it's me progressing down the path that I kind of set myself. And again, whatever that path is completely up to the individual. Yeah.
Yep. 100%, man. I'm glad you said that, because it is coming to that conclusion of knowing that we're all one. And then from there, you're like, all right, so what then? Like, what do you do? All right, we're now one. Well, okay, that means I'm probably, if you're a good person, I'm going to make the world a better place through whatever, or, it could be your personal life, could just be, you treat your dog better or something, or whatever it is. But, I think it also has a lot to do with, like we talked about at the beginning, the creative aspects. Mm-hmm. And creating, literally, we all create that better world for each other.
Yeah. And I think, and those changes to make that better world can be minuscule. They can be, and this is something that I also see a lot on retreats. So like, there's a lot of people want to save the world, like, like just in one go, overnight. Mm-hmm. And I think, and again, this might even be before they've sort of completed the work on themselves, but just the smallest sort of things, like say, having a conversation, sort of, being friendly to a stranger. You don't have to sort of, occupy Wall Street every day for the rest of your life. It doesn't, the smallest bit of progress is still progress.
Yeah.
And again, there's something there that you shouldn't necessarily convince yourself that you're making progress. If you're not, you should be honest enough with yourself to be able to check in and know that you're doing it. But yeah, I think if you set yourself those goals too high, then they fall over because it was just beyond your capabilities. And again, that can sort of send you back the other way then. And then it's like, oh, you're back into sort of depression because you failed at your goals and stuff like that. So I'm sort of a big proponent of the, little realistic things, and coming back to the we all one. If everyone's doing that, then that's I think where sort of change happens, quite rapidly. It doesn't necessarily. It's not on you to bring about the rapid change. It's on you to bring about the changes within you.
Yep. Yeah, 100%, man. 100%. I mean, I like how you said too. How like when something's off, because I have that same sense too, and I know when I'm just like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this right now. I should be, doing something else. But like, there is that. It's like once you open the door, like once you have that revelation that we just talked about of that, the awakening, it's it's like you don't really close it. It's not something that you can shut yourself off to. Like nobody could tell me that I'm not connected to anybody else right now.
Yeah, but that can also go the other way. Me and my wife often talk about this because then you get the sort of the situation of like ignorance is bliss. So like, it's like, God, don't you just miss the days when you could just play video games for 10 hours and that was fine, and just stuffing your face with KFC, and it was that was just a good day. And we always say like, would you go? You know, it's the Matrix conversation. Would you go back? Because yeah, when you open the door to all those good things and you know, and broaden the experience, but then you are sort of opening the door to all the kind of, you know, all the trauma and the pain and suffering, which I talked about earlier. But and some days that can be overwhelming, and it can be, you know, and you can have days where you think, you know, is the world actually getting better? And you know, it broadens your appreciation of the negative as well. And it's very tempting to think, God, yeah, I wish I'd just stayed behind that firewall. And I guess that's what a lot of people do, you know, and I think that's why something like probably, you know, ayahuasca does sound particularly alien to people, because it's when you say to people like, you know, going to the jungle, you get high, and you look, if you get high, if you're lucky, but you're throwing up, and some guy's chanting at you and smacking you over the head with a bunch of leaves, and you know, you shit your pants, and I'm like, what? People think you've gone insane, but yeah, I mean, it's like I say, it's one of those experiences that you challenge yourself with. Yeah. But it is a conversation that's come up a few times. Like, would you go back? Would you?
I wouldn't go back, because it's just it's not real bliss. Like, it's not, you know, that ignorance is just false bliss. Like, I think the real bliss lies in is confronting who we actually are and what is actually going on through your changes. And if you just stay stuck in that previous state that we're talking about, you're just stuck in this loop of suffering, and you just, you know, it's not the truth, you know?
Yeah, it's almost like being sort of, you know, born in like a sort of a, you know, in an insane asylum in a padded room where you can't hurt yourself and your food just gets brought to you, and that's your knowledge of life. But you know, nobody would say they want to do that. You know, I know some people who like have never left the town that they grew up in, and again, that just seems crazy to me. Like, why would you not want the experience? Oh, well, it's, you know, it's risky out there. Well, yeah, there's risks everywhere. You've got to take those things in order to experience them. Again, there's risks jumping out of an airplane. There's risks going to the International Space Station. But you know, you don't see the astronauts in the International Space Station sat there going, I wish I'd just stayed back at Cape Canaveral. You've got to. That's the only way that the transcendent happens is by putting yourself out there outside of your comfort zone. So. Yeah, I think that's one thing that, you know, guys like sort of you and me can do, in that we can, like I said, we have these conversations where we can talk about these experiences in a way where we're not going into sort of, you know, hopefully in a way that people can relate to, which will then encourage sort of people who it hadn't necessarily crossed their mind to do these things before because they thought this was just purely for hippies. Then yeah, they'll think, okay, I'll try these things. And well, I certainly get messages to that effect on my channel. I think those are the most rewarding ones that I get, when people say, wow, you know, I didn't realize there was such a, you know, an experience to be had within this. I'm kind of, okay, I've just signed up for my first ayahuasca retreat, so I'm going to try DMT or something. It's like, cool, that's good, man. You know, it's good. It's good that I've sort of, you know, can reach people in that way.
That's awesome, man. You're changing people's lives, essentially.
Right, yeah. Again, only a few, but that's all it takes.
Yeah, that's it. It's just it's the small steps. But that's why I started this whole platform, because I want to have these long conversations with people that they can hopefully dive into and see that, like, you know, it's more, like you said, it's more than just hippies. It's these things are legitimate medicines that, if used correctly, you can become a better person. And you know, it's if me and you can have this conversation about it, and we can come to some conclusions, and people can see that we are obviously, I think people think we're level-headed, and they might see that, like, to see that it's just a simple dialogue and the conversation, I think, can do a lot for people, man.
Yeah, and that is the best evangelism, I think, that there possibly can be is to, if you see someone that you can relate to or that you think has like you say, is level-headed, or is kind of like, is tuned in, or is capable in some way, then, the people might say, particularly with me, like I mentioned, I was in a different situation a few years ago. I was in a bad way. So now people are coming to say, like, Rob, you seem much better. Like, what's going on with you? And I can say, yeah, I went and did this retreat thing, and I know it sounds kind of kooky, but I did this, and I feel better for it. And I've had that conversation, like, with sort of people I work with, people in my social life. I had it with my parents. I've had it with my wife's parents, and I'm kind of evangelizing by my actions, which I think is the way to do it, rather than somebody who has this and then says, oh my God, everybody needs to have this experience. We need to put LSD in the water supply. Everyone needs to have it. And I'm like, no. This is the kind of like the crazy reaction. This is what people will push back against. But if, when, say you see someone like Sam Harris or you hear like Steve Jobs or something like that, and they had these LSD experiences, or Francis Crick or something, then you think, oh, right, well, yeah, it's not just for kooks. I've had these experiences, and I will tell anybody about what goes on in the Amazon, but I go and do my job, and I'm doing my job well, and I'm, I get glowing reviews from the people I work with. So yeah, it's not necessarily turning me into some dribbling sort of new age, fringe druid. I'm still, I would say, I would make the argument I am more capable now as a human being than I was 6 or 7 years ago, because then I was falling apart.
Yeah. I think it's just because we're living in the remnants of the 60s and 70s. For sure, yeah. Of the drug war and the hippie movement and Timothy Leary. So that's what people see these psychedelics and entheogens as. But, like I said, we are opening up a new dialogue into the potentials of what these actually are. Yeah, and all the sort of the research voices here, I think, are making a huge difference, because there's all these kind of studies going on in England. I'm assuming there's stuff going on as well through the US, but the books that are getting rid of, like the sort of the Michael Pollan book, these are respectable voices. I mean, I thought Michael Pollan was just a brilliant advocate, because this is. He was just a journalist, and a very well-respected journalist. He wasn't known for being out there or being sort of psychedelic, and he charted that whole experience of him investigating these substances and taking these substances. And that's when you've got like a journalist of that caliber doing it, then people have, you have to pay attention to it. It's like, okay, right, this is not just for kooks anymore. This is there is something here, and we can report on it, and we can get data on it, and you can, there's all these studies coming out around, people, resolving sort of lifelong addictions and sort of, major depressive trauma. Yeah, this is now becoming like hard science, and so yeah, I think I do believe this is a kind of a golden age. I'm just got such gratitude that I was here to live through it. I mean, who would have thought? Yeah, this is just the beginning of like a new renaissance. And sometimes I'm like, oh man, this is just the beginning. I'm like, I'm not going to see where the actual world ends up. Cause like, by the time I'm like 80, it's going to be a whole different world. And I think ideally we have these medicines incorporated into our lives. And yeah, sometimes I'm like, oh man, this is just like the beginning. Like we're still technically living through the drug war, and I can't wait to see this ideal world that I have in my head and see where it's going to go. And I mean, what do you think, how do you see these things being incorporated into the world in the next, say, like 10, 20 years? Yeah, I'm not sure, and I'm not exactly sure how I want to see them incorporated. So, I mean, I certainly want to see them incorporated somewhere, but I'm very wary of it, the pendulum swinging the other way back into the 1960s, Timothy Leary sort of thing. So I definitely don't want that. I've got my viewpoint as a parent of two kids, and I wouldn't say I'm particularly in the camp of, I want everything available to, I certainly don't want a world where my kids can go and pick up heroin on, any sort of street corner. Yeah. So that then like brings the question, what is that middle ground then? How can it be integrated? I think
probably an extension of what we have today in this kind of, there are certain medical centers or, psychotherapy centers where you can do things like LSD or psilocybin. We've certainly got like the ayahuasca kind of structure. I think I see the future as some sort of extension of that, whereby there are places where you can go to, whereby you can be guided through these kind of experiences. Yeah. And that's not necessarily to say what people can or cannot do in their own home, because obviously I do things in my own home, but I think there is a distinction, which again I've not quite got the perfect word in here, but whereby people need to be educated that there is a world of difference, I think, between being a sovereign human being and doing a sort of a substance, and going through a guided healing process. So it's like, I don't think I could have necessarily had the same revelations I had around all this sort of trauma with my mother, just doing it solo in my bedroom. Maybe some people could do. Obviously, some people are sort of more tuned in than others. But personally, I don't think I could have done. I think I needed that structure of, because when you're at a retreat, you're basically in 24/7 therapy. You're just surrounded by teams of people. You're constantly talking in kind of like a therapeutic setting. Then you have the actual meetings with the shamans and stuff like that. And it doesn't have to be a traditional thing. That's not to say what I'm advocating for. I'm just advocating for some kind of guided process whereby someone takes you through this. You see this with Iboga or Ibogaine, where people are doing like some addiction treatment. They don't just give you, Ibogaine and just throw you in a room. Someone's guiding you through this kind of addiction breaking process. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we need. I think there needs to be that sort of structure of centers, maybe somehow incorporated into the health systems. Obviously that then sort of creates questions of like government getting too much involved. And so that's where I need someone smarter than me to work that bit out. But that would be how I would hope it would be in the future, that my kids or grandkids could not have to jump through quite as many hoops as I jumped through to get the help if they felt they needed it.
I agree with you. I see it as there'll be treatment centers, almost like, I wouldn't say replacing how we have, psychological trauma centers now, but there'll just be like another add-on, like, it's just another option for people. And then as well, I see it as being decriminalized, like all these substances being decriminalized. Like, I don't think we'll have like dispensaries for mushrooms or ayahuasca. I mean, maybe. I just don't see that within the next 50 years, but I think it would just be decriminalized at first. And then there'll also be treatment centers where you can go and sign up and go through the whole process and have that guided experience if you'd like.
Yeah, for sure, decriminalized. I mean, that the last thing I'd want to see is people being punished for, having sovereignty over their own bodies. And what you mentioned about the sort of like the treatment aspect, it's funny because I live in Switzerland, and in some places they already have that aspect. My German teacher, when she had her kids, she had postnatal depression, and she was offered LSD treatment. Which LSD is very intrinsic to Switzerland anyway, because this is where exactly. It sort of came up with it. We have the bicycle day celebrations and stuff here, but that seems to me like it is now another tool in the toolbox. So it's like, in England, if you went to your doctor and you said, "Doctor, I don't know what's up with me. I'm all messed up," it would just be, right, here's the pills. Done, there's no counseling, there's no therapy, there's not even the diagnostic tools. It's just write the prescription for antidepressants and off you go. Yep. And so I was so pleased to hear when they were talking about sort of, LSD therapy and, just something other than the sort of one size fits all sort of pharmaceutical sort of solution. So I think hopefully see more of that, and these treatments, the ones that sort of prove effective, MDMA is sort of getting great results in terms of, for PTSD and stuff. So yeah, I would love to see these incorporated into just what we call medicine, because that's what it is. It's all just sort of medicine.
Yep. So they have centers like that in Switzerland where you can just take LSD?
I believe so, and I don't know whether that what she was offered was like part of a trial or whether it's the different sort of cantons here in Switzerland have different regulations and stuff. So I don't know if it's available everywhere. But yeah, I mean, it's, you know, I think the culture here is very, you know, we have all these different things in there, even like assisted suicide is like something you can do in Switzerland. If you want to go and end your own life, you can do that. And I don't know many other places in the world that do that. So it's quite a different culture here. They're a lot more, in some ways, a lot more open than the other cultures that I've been to, and in some ways they're very conservative, and it's a strange place. It is.
I mean, yeah, Switzerland, I can imagine from what I've heard, is a very unique place to be in Europe. I've heard they actually have like I watched this a while ago. They have these centers that they give people like clean heroin, like they give them clean needles and heroin. I'm like, well, that's a very interesting concept. Yeah,
it's just because they were having the heroin problem was huge apparently, and so yeah, they just came at it from a different angle and just brought down sort of disease, reduced homelessness, reduced poverty. Just a huge success just by. Again, it's one of these things of is heroin the problem, or is there a root cause which people are trying to medicate with the heroin? So if you come at it from that perspective, then you take away the problems around heroin of, first of all, the having to get hold of it, having to commit crimes to get hold of it, having to open yourself up to disease by using dirty needles and stuff like that. And then so all that stuff's off the table, and now you can start working on the kind of the root cause. Like, why are you taking heroin? Mm-hmm. And yeah, compare that to sort of, again, back in like England, where I come from, where it's the complete opposite thing. And, particularly as you get sort of further up north, and there's just these huge sort of heroin epidemics, and mm-hmm. it then becomes this kind of fulfilling cycle of that, where you need to commit crime to do the heroin, and you don't have the facilities for clean needles. So everyone's, everyone was catching all these different, blood disease and stuff, and it just becomes a huge nightmare. And I think they've had similar success in Portugal, where they've just sort of, again, decriminalized pretty much everything. Yeah. To great effect. So I think there's, something for the rest of the world to pay attention to there.
Yeah, that's the future, man, because we can all come to the conclusion the war on drugs is an absolute failure. It's done absolutely nothing just other than ruining people's lives. And, people are going to do drugs. That's what it comes down to. We're human beings. We're going to experiment with our consciousness and try to feel good in whatever way that we can. So, you're not going to stop us. There's no law that's going to stop us from doing it. So, I mean, I guess that makes sense. It seems counterintuitive, but it makes sense in a way. There's like, all right, well, if you're going to do it, then here's a clean needle and here's some clean heroin. It definitely does make sense.
Yeah. And again, I think when you get to that cause, it is people are, life can be difficult, and people are trying to sort of, medicate their way through these things. And, it's sort of uncompassionate in a way to say to someone like, if you do that thing which brings you sort of, relief, which allows you to function as a human being, if you do that thing which, granted for that moment, solves all your problems, then you are a criminal. We're going to lock you in a box. Yeah. And that's, and sometimes you do just need to solve that problem just today. I've been in situations like, it's similar with like sort of the antidepressant situation. Like I do not demonize antidepressants at all. I think there are times in people's lives whereby you've just got to survive the day. You've got to get through this because today you can't cope with it. Maybe in 8 weeks' time, maybe 12 weeks' time, then you can cope with, some kind of horrific, just some parent who's just lost their children in some sort of horrific way. Mm-hmm. Like sometimes that's too much to deal with on day one. And if you can get some help to get you to sort of, week 12, where you think, okay, I'm now ready to face my grief, or I'm now ready to face this sort of challenge, I think that's a completely valid application of something like, antidepressants. Or again, I would never advocate for something like heroin or morphine, but I can understand why someone might want to, if you ever see like an interview with like a heroin addict, some of these stories are heartbreaking. You'll hear the human suffering which you never thought possible, and then to sort of say, oh well, you shouldn't be doing heroin. Then like, who the fuck are you to say that I shouldn't be doing like? Oh, did you just hear what this person said? So yeah, I would say that the answer is always to get those people into a place where they can heal themselves, and not to sort of turn them into criminals, or which is what I think of what this war on drugs. The war on drugs turns people into criminals, because they weren't necessarily criminals before that. They were addicts. They needed help, but they weren't necessarily criminals. Yeah, and that's all you've done is kind of made turn people into criminals. And then there's you could go further down the rabbit hole where was it just to feed the kind of the criminal systems or.
Yeah, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
I think what it comes down to is that for me personally, we're all just trying to be happy. We're all just trying to find some kind of peace, some kind of freedom, in whatever way you do it. Some people find it in drugs or whatever way. There's various amounts of ways that people find happiness. And if you're not hurting anybody, in my opinion, if you're not hurting anybody at all, then you should be free to do it. It might be hurting yourself, but I don't even think we should be intrusive in the way of, if you want to hurt yourself, I guess go ahead. As long as you're not hurting anybody else in this world, I think you should have the freedom to do whatever you need to do to find that happiness.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the phrase which I like around it's sovereignty. It's like I should have sovereignty over my own consciousness, my sort of own human experience. And that's, again, it's not a get out of jail free card. It doesn't mean that, people, if I'm going sort of too far, then I want my sort of family and friends to intervene and sort of, help me out. But like I say, if I'm, in terms of my experience, then the sovereignty lies with me, and I should be sort of free to do it. And and again, this comes back to what we're just saying about Switzerland and the sort of the right to end your life. That is your choice. That's, and I know this is a insanely controversial subject, but it's I could imagine a scenario whereby perhaps this experience has come to an end for me, and maybe it could be for reasons of say if my family aren't here anymore and I've just lost connection, I'm on my own, I'm lonely, or perhaps I'm just in incredible pain or whatever. Still, I'm just to be absolutely clear to everybody, I'm not advocating for suicide, but I am advocating that if that choice lies with me, and that only with me. The state or you cannot force me to stay alive. And the kind of responsibility that then puts on myself and the world around me is I should want to stay alive. I should, that's kind of on me. But if I don't, then that's my sort of choice to cash those chips in.
Yeah, 100%, man. Just comes down to freedom.
Yeah.
Just being able to be free to who we are, who we want to be.
Or not.
Or not, yeah. Of course, if you don't want to be.
Anyone at all.
Yeah. I mean, we'll get there. Hopefully we'll get to a world where we have that kind of freedom. I mean, we have the freedom of speech, which is something that, people thousands, hundreds of years ago couldn't even imagine. I think it's something great that I can say whatever I want on this microphone, and there's no one that's going to kick in my door. Unless I admit to some kind of crime, but I can say, you know what I mean? I can express my opinion on whatever I want to say. And, we can have these conversations about these experiences and not have to worry really about anything. So that is a freedom that I think maybe we take for granted, but there are also other freedoms.
Yeah, I think we definitely take that one for granted. And I think I think we're seeing that one being tested a little bit at the moment in the current situation. There's a lot of sort of talk around what you can or cannot say, and I get the intention there is good, but I think I am wary of it going into sort of, bad sort of totalitarian style, North Korea-esque setting of what you can and cannot say. But I agree with your premise. I think that thankfully I can say what I want, and I can say what I want with the consequences of whatever I say. So if I just go on some massive racist tirade now, then I can live with those consequences. But if I was some sort of neo-Nazi, then maybe those are the consequences I want to live with, and that's their choice. If neo-Nazis want to be neo-Nazis, and other people want to be opposed to neo-Nazis, that's fine. Everyone should be able to say what they want and have the right to say that. And I recently did a video about a guy in the UK does a podcast called Brian Rose, and who had this kind of conspiracy theory guy called David Icke, who goes talks a lot about reptile, lizard people and stuff like that. And there was a big kerfuffle because a lot of Brian Rose's videos got pulled from YouTube. And I am completely against what Brian Rose was saying in those videos, but I am completely opposed. I think they should have been left there for people to see, because if you want to talk about sort of conspiracies with lizard people and stuff like that, go for it. It makes it even easier for the rest of us then, because I put my ideas out now, and everyone now knows that right. Rob likes psychedelics. There's nothing covert about it. Like, this is my ideas, and people can decide whether they want to have a relationship with me there, or whether they want to engage me, or if I'm completely full of shit. Perfect. And I think that goes likewise for again, the guys who want to believe in whatever conspiracy it is, or the guys who want to, have whatever views about whatever it is they want to. Let's get it all out there. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, and that's the way that we can, I think, pick out the good ideas from the bad when they're all in the open. Because if things start happening behind closed doors, then I think that's the kind of the worst possible scenario. Yeah. So I'm very grateful for the climate of sort of free speech that we have.
Yeah, because that's what a lot of people would argue is that it's the start of like a dystopian controlling our idea of controlling our speech. Because if they can do it with David Icke and Brian Rose, because I think they took it off because they were saying like 5G it has something to do with the coronavirus, something like that. Yeah, so they didn't want the conspiracy theory spreading. But if they qualify that as a conspiracy theory, which it might be, I really don't know too much about it, then that lays the premise for what they can do in the future for things that, people, whatever we're going to be talking about in the future. If they can do it with David Icke and Brian Rose, then that means they can do it with something else and call something else a conspiracy theory, which actually might have some validity to it, and then get that taken off. And that's people's fear of, this dystopian future that we're moving toward, which I don't know if I think YouTube's, I don't know, maybe I'm just sold on the YouTube propaganda, but I don't think YouTube really had any malicious intent doing that. I really think they just wanted to remove David Icke and Brian Rose spreading this misinformation so people don't go tear down 5G cell towers anymore.
Yeah, I think it was a bit of both. And I've got a lot more sympathy for David Icke than I do for Brian Rose in that situation, because David Icke, I think, is, I've been very open. I think the guy's a complete lunatic, and, he's from England, and we've been listening to his nonsense since like the 1990s.
Well, you know what the thing is about him? One sec. Is he has a lot of good points too. Like, he has a lot of
for sure. And
then he also has stuff. It's like, wait, what?
Yeah. Well, this is kind of my great frustration with David Icke. But my point I was getting to was that I will grant, I think David Icke is 100% sincere. I don't think he's right. I think he's 100% sincere. And I think my biggest frustration with David Icke is that I can agree with David Icke 80% of the way. Like, he will talk about the problems with the banking system, the sort of, the problems of the sort of the monarchy being a sort of a tax strain in England. There is some sort of, there are some conspiracies which are, clearly happening. There clearly is an elite which has more money than the rest of us do. All these things, and I'm like, yes. And then it's like, and they're lizard people who are, who require the blood of virgins. And I'm like, oh, right. No, everything else is just tarred with the brush. And like, you can, it's so frustrating. I can watch like a documentary and with David Icke on it, and it's like, oh, David, you've turned over a new leaf. This is brilliant. This is so, here we go. Here's the connection to the lizard people. Right. Okay. And I think he's his worst saboteur. And, and this is, it's like a popular thing that people say against him, like, oh, he was right about this. And yeah, he's not talking complete bullshit nonstop. It's just this last connection that he makes I think is a complete misfire. But I do have sympathy for him. And I think in terms of like YouTube and censorship, there's an algorithmic aspect to it. So, I can definitely go and make a video and put certain keywords in it, and that video will get pulled because I've triggered the algorithm to if I made a video, I won't say those things now just in case it has a negative effect on you, but and that would be kind of expected, and it would be the sort of the things around the pandemic and stuff like that.
Yep.
But I think like. No, there's that aspect where the algorithm's doing it, but then there does seem to be another aspect whereby there's a human pushing a button there, because not only did David Icke, those videos about David Icke get pulled algorithmically, his entire account got shut down, and he went on this kind of like blacklist. That didn't happen by the algorithm. Somebody did that, and I think that was wrong. That was a bad call, and we've seen this. With people who get pulled from Patreon and get pulled from PayPal, and, basically making it almost impossible for them to function within this kind of information society that we're in. You're being blacklisted, basically excommunicated from the internet.
Yeah. And
that's horrific, I think, in this day and age. I would not wish that on the person I disagree with most ever. I want all those ideas out there, and if there's people who want to support those ideas, and the downside here is then you've then got to accept that also means that they can support the worst ideas.
Yeah.
But still, I think like none of us, I think, are even particularly qualified to, to say this person should cease to exist as a human being in the modern age. And I know I could point at something that most people would agree with, like say a neo-Nazi, something that's still a human being who needs to live. And if they make their living through PayPal or whatever, then they, with a family to feed, a little family of neo-Nazis, you can't just pull the plug on someone's fucking livelihood, on an ability to communicate. Like that's almost like a kind of, an intellectual death sentence, if not a financial death sentence. So I'm completely opposed to that. And I do think there is somebody, there are certainly people at these big social media places of Twitter, Facebook, Google, who have that button that they can press. Mm-hmm. And so, the algorithm, I will cut a lot of slack because it's just looking for the keywords. The person who's getting triggered and he's pushing and he's saying, no, then that person, that's the bit I think where regulation possibly needs to step in. And again, how that happens, no idea.
Yeah, right. We're just bringing up the topics. We don't know the solution.
We're just bitching about it, man. Yeah, somebody else can go and fix the big problems, man. We'll just complain about it.
Hey, somebody's gonna say it. That's our job, I guess. But man, I 100% agree with you. I think we can start to wrap this thing up. We've been talking for a while.
It's been good, man.
Yeah, I think you're a cool guy. I think you're, you got good energy, good vibes. Definitely watching any kind of videos that you put out in the future. And do you have anything else that you want to say?
Not really, mate. I don't know. I just open my mouth and stuff falls out. So I just all I'd say is that if anybody who's likes the stuff I'm saying here, then just check out my YouTube channel, which is called Adeptus Psychonautica, and I sort of post once or twice a week. You can also, I've got a subreddit also called Adeptus Psychonautica, and if you search me on Instagram, you can find me there. So if anybody wants to reach out and get in touch, I'm always willing to sort of to chat. You can, I think conversations like this, the best tool. I've really enjoyed this conversation, guys. So thanks a lot, man, for reaching out. I think that's about a good place to wrap up, I think.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, man. Like I said, I'm grateful for you coming on here. I think we had a good time. I really don't even remember everything that we talked about, but that's why it's good. Definitely. The best conversations are the ones that just kind of flow. And this really has, mate. So again, this is the golden age we live in, where we can do this, just connect with
with strangers across on the other side of the world and become friends. So it's been awesome, mate.
Beautiful time to be alive, man. So yes, Rob from Adeptus Psychonautica.
Psychonautica. Yeah.
Thank you for coming on.
You're welcome, mate. It's been a pleasure. Cheers, dude.